Pakistan is a classic case of economic growth without development, in a sense that in terms of the overall income level, Pakistan does really poor in terms of the human development. So there's no correlation in terms of the average incomes, while the social development indicators are very poor. And part of it is that Pakistan has been suffering on those twin account deficits issues. So Pakistan has to go to IMF for many times in the past. And currently we are entering into another IMF program. So in terms of you representing United Nations, it's a much more democratic structure, whereas one country has one vote, whereas in terms of IMF, it is few rich countries have disproportionately higher share in terms of the policy mechanisms and the administrative control. So there's an argument across developing world and also in Pakistan that IMF policies or IMF driven programs increase hardship for average people. And how do you see that argument?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fairly classic argument and a fairly classic critique of the IMF. I mean, they are different institutions. I mean, the IMF is more or less has a board of shareholders, a bit like the World Bank, where the larger shareholders have more voice. Albeit the composition of the larger shareholders have changed, and China, for example, as the second largest economy in the world now, has a much larger voice than it did 10 years ago. But in terms of the program for Pakistan, I think the IMF did change, especially under the leadership of Christine Lagarde over the last years. And I think they have put more emphasis on social indicators. And even in the program that has been agreed on with the government, I mean, there are provisions, for example, that permit spending on social issues, that permit spending on the ESAS program. The way the targets are put for generating revenue, they're meant to be progressive, with more weight on rich people than on poor people. I think the difficulty, and as you're a political economist you would know this, is that even though the current government is putting a huge emphasis on actually getting people into the tax net who've been outside the tax net, in a country with as many challenges in governance as Pakistan, it's still quite hard to do that. And when a government is short of revenue, the easiest thing is to reduce subsidies across the board. And if you reduce subsidies across the board, it tends to have a larger impact on poor people.
Yes.
It's also easier to put sales tax and things that you can easily raise. And again, that disproportionately affects the poor. So although I think the IMF has recognized this in the program, it's going to be quite important that the government explicitly, hopefully with international support, can fight this natural tendency there is to move away from getting more progressive taxes, more from income taxes, and to instead focus on getting revenue or reducing expenditure, which tends to hurt the poor rather than the rich. But it's partly a function of the economic situation the country finds itself in.